Today, I want to talk to you about something that affects every single one of us, our ability to focus. And more importantly, why so many of us keep losing it. You see, focus isn't just about trying harder or having more willpower. It's about understanding what your brain and body are actually doing and what they need in order to sustain attention. Most people never learn this, so they end up stuck in the same loop. Focus is one of the most misunderstood aspects of human performance. People often think of it as a fixed personality trait, something you either have or you don't. Some believe they're just not the type who can concentrate deeply for long periods, while others assume that focus is simply about trying harder or forcing themselves to block out distractions. But this is not how focus actually works. In reality, focus is a limited biological resource, rooted in the very structure and chemistry of the brain and body. And like any resource, it can be depleted, restored, and managed, but not infinitely stretched or magically summoned through willpower alone. When you understand this, you begin to see why so many people struggle to stay focused, even when their intentions are strong. The human brain has evolved to prioritize novelty, to scan the environment for threats or opportunities, and to shift attention when something more salient appears. This was adaptive for survival in an ancestral environment full of predators and uncertainty, but in today's world, where we are constantly bombarded by notifications, messages, and competing demands, it often works against us. Every time you're pulled away by a text message or the temptation to check your social media feed, it's not because you're lazy or weak. It's because your brain's attentional circuits are being hijacked by stimuli that are engineered to capture your limited supply of focus. Focus requires energy, and that energy comes from real biological systems that can only sustain it for so long before they need recovery. Neuroscience shows that the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive control, planning, and maintaining focus, is highly sensitive to depletion. It draws heavily on metabolic resources, particularly glucose and oxygen. When those resources are consumed faster than they can be replenished, your ability to focus declines. This is why after a long session of intense mental work, you feel fatigued even if you've been sitting still. The very circuits that enable focus are not unlimited. They fatigue just like your muscles do after a hard workout. Yet most people don't think about focus in this way. They assume that if they just try harder or berate themselves for being distracted, they can somehow force more focus out of a tired brain. But this often backfires, leading to frustration, stress, and even less ability to concentrate. Another layer to this is that the brain's attentional resources are governed not just by energy, but also by neurochemistry. Neurotransmitters like norepinephrine, acetylcholine, and dopamine all play crucial roles in sustaining attention on a task. Norepinephrine acts like a spotlight, heightening alertness and helping you block out irrelevant stimuli. Acetylcholine helps tune your neural circuits to the task at hand, enhancing the signal-to-noise ratio in your brain. Dopamine, meanwhile, provides the motivation to stay engaged, giving you that sense of reward and progress as you continue working. These chemicals are not inexhaustible, and they fluctuate based on your internal state, sleep quality, nutrition, hydration, and even light exposure all influence their levels. When you fail to respect the biological nature of focus, it's easy to fall into a cycle of depletion. People push themselves to work through fatigue without breaks, draining their attentional systems. They flood their brains with artificial dopamine hits from endless scrolling or multitasking, making it harder for their reward circuits to sustain engagement on harder, less stimulating tasks. They neglect sleep or proper nutrition, further undermining the delicate neurochemical balance required for sustained focus. Then they wonder why they can't seem to concentrate, and mistakenly conclude that it's a moral failing rather than a biological one. Understanding that focus is a limited resource helps reframe this struggle as something you can work with rather than fight against. Even the most successful and high-performing individuals do not maintain perfect focus all day long. They structure their work around periods of intense focus and periods of rest and recovery. They protect their attentional energy by managing their internal state and minimizing unnecessary drains on their resources. They understand that just as you wouldn't expect to lift weights for hours on end without a break, you can't expect your brain to maintain deep, undivided attention without honoring its limits and needs. Focus is not about being a superhuman who never gets distracted. It's about learning how your biology really works and creating the right conditions to allow your limited attentional resources to be used wisely and effectively. By recognizing that focus is a finite biological resource, you begin to see the hidden forces that shape your ability to concentrate. It's no longer just about trying harder or blaming yourself for being distracted. It's about aligning your behavior, your environment, and your habits with what your brain and body are capable of. Once you shift your perspective in this way, you open the door to strategies that are grounded in how focus actually operates, rather than how we wish it did. This is the foundation of building real, sustainable focus in your life. Your ability to focus is not just determined by what's happening in your external environment, but also by the internal state of your body and mind. Too often people overlook how profoundly their internal physiological and psychological condition dictates whether they can sustain attention or not. Focus is not simply a mental exercise. It is an embodied state, one that depends on the balance of your nervous system, your hormonal levels, your energy reserves, and even your emotional landscape. When your internal state is chaotic, stressed, fatigued, or poorly regulated, the circuits of your brain that allow you to focus simply cannot function as they should. This is why two people in the same environment, facing the same distractions, can experience entirely different outcomes in their ability to stay present and engaged with a task. The one whose internal state is calm, balanced, and resourced will find it much easier to concentrate than the one whose internal state is dysregulated. Stress is one of the most common factors that undermines focus from the inside out. When you are under chronic stress, your nervous system enters a state of hypervigilance, constantly scanning for threats, constantly prepared to react. This state of heightened arousal, driven by the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, may have been adaptive in an evolutionary sense when you needed to flee danger or confront immediate threat, but it is maladaptive when you are trying to sit quietly and focus on deep work. In this stressed state, the hormones cortisol and adrenaline flood your system, sharpening your sensitivity to distractions, priming you for fast, reactive behavior rather than slow, deliberate thought. You find yourself unable to hold your attention on a single task because your body is telling your brain to keep looking around for danger, to stay alert to every stimulus. This is not a personal weakness. It is simply how the human nervous system is wired. The quality of your sleep is another powerful determinant of your internal state, and therefore of your capacity to focus. Sleep is when your brain clears out metabolic waste, resets neurotransmitter levels, and consolidates memory. Even one night of poor sleep impairs the functioning of the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain most responsible for regulating attention and resisting impulses. You may notice that on days when you are sleep deprived, your mind feels foggy, your thoughts feel scattered, and your ability to resist the pull of distractions is almost non-existent. This is not surprising when you understand that sleep is the foundation of cognitive control. Trying to focus while running on insufficient sleep is like trying to drive a car with no oil. The machinery simply cannot run smoothly. Yet many people chronically underestimate the role of sleep in their mental performance, believing they can simply push through or make up for it with more effort. Nutrition and hydration also play essential roles in shaping your internal state and your ability to sustain attention. Your brain is an energy-hungry organ consuming a disproportionate amount of glucose and oxygen compared to its size. When you skip meals, eat in ways that spike and crash your blood sugar, or fail to drink enough water, your brain's metabolic needs are not being met. The result is reduced cognitive capacity, mental fatigue, and poor impulse control. Specific micronutrients such as magnesium, omega-3 fatty acids, and certain B vitamins are also crucial for the proper functioning of neurotransmitters involved in focus. When your body is undernourished or imbalanced, it becomes that much harder to maintain the kind of internal stability that focus requires. Your emotional state, too, is a powerful internal factor that either supports or sabotages your ability to concentrate. Anxiety, worry, sadness, anger, these emotional states narrow your mental bandwidth, occupying your attentional resources with internal chatter and self-referential thoughts. When you are emotionally unsettled, your mind keeps circling around the source of that emotion, pulling you away from the task at hand. On the other hand, states of calm, confidence, and positive anticipation broaden your mental capacity, allowing you to direct your focus outward to sustain engagement with the present moment. Learning to regulate your emotions through practices like mindfulness, breathing exercises, or cognitive reframing is not just about feeling better emotionally, it is also a practical tool for improving your ability to focus. Even light exposure and circadian rhythms influence your internal state and thereby your attentional control. Natural light in the morning helps regulate your body's clock, synchronizing your energy peaks and valleys with the demands of your day. When your circadian rhythm is misaligned, either through irregular sleep schedules, too much artificial light at night, or too little daylight during the day, your internal state becomes confused, leaving you groggy when you want to focus and restless when you want to rest. This internal misalignment erodes the natural rhythms of alertness and focus that your body is designed to support. All of these factors, stress, sleep, nutrition, hydration, emotional regulation, circadian rhythm, form the internal terrain on which your attentional systems operate. If that terrain is rocky, uneven, and poorly maintained, no amount of willpower or external discipline will be enough to sustain focus for long. But if you cultivate a stable and supportive internal state, you make it much easier for your brain to do what it is designed to do. You create the conditions for focus to emerge naturally without constant struggle. Recognizing this connection between your internal state and your ability to focus allows you to approach concentration not as a battle of self-control, but as a process of aligning your physiology and psychology with your goals. This is the hidden foundation of sustained attention and one of the most overlooked elements in the modern conversation about focus and productivity. Dopamine is one of the most important neurochemicals when it comes to focus because it directly governs motivation, reward, and the ability to stay engaged with a task. What most people don't realize is that modern life is full of stimuli that hijack the dopamine system, making it harder to sustain attention on meaningful but challenging work. Every time you check your phone, scroll through social media, or jump between apps, you're giving your brain a little burst of dopamine. These bursts are designed to feel good, to keep you coming back, but they also train your brain to crave novelty and instant gratification. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where the harder, more sustained focus required for deep work feels boring, even aversive, compared to the constant stimulation of quick hits of dopamine from distractions. This is why even when you sit down with the best intentions to concentrate, your mind almost reflexively starts searching for something else to do within minutes. The dopamine system evolved to help humans pursue goals, to keep moving forward toward rewards that were often difficult and uncertain to achieve. In an environment where food was scarce or survival depended on sustained effort, dopamine drove our ancestors to persist in hunting, gathering, and problem solving. The system was not designed for a world where dopamine triggers are everywhere, where you can get a sense of reward simply by glancing at a screen or clicking a button. Each time you give in to one of these artificial sources of novelty, your brain registers a reward, but it also raises the threshold for what feels stimulating. The more often you flood your dopamine receptors with quick hits, the less responsive they become over time, a phenomenon called downregulation. As your baseline levels of dopamine sensitivity drop, it becomes more difficult to derive satisfaction from ordinary tasks that require focus but don't offer immediate payoff. This downregulation has profound implications for focus. When your dopamine system is overstimulated and desensitized, tasks that once felt manageable and even rewarding now seem dull and frustrating. Reading a book, writing a report, learning a skill, all of these require what's called tonic, dopamine signaling, a steady stream of engagement over time. But if your brain is used to phasic, dopamine spikes from constant novelty, it will resist staying in the lower but more sustainable state required for deep focus. Instead, you'll find yourself compulsively seeking the next hit, checking your phone, opening a new tab, switching tasks before finishing the one in front of you. This is not because you lack discipline, but because your dopamine system has been conditioned to expect and crave instant rewards. The good news is that the dopamine system is highly plastic, meaning it can adapt and recover if you change the way you engage with it. Just as overloading your brain with constant novelty trains it to be scattered, training it to tolerate boredom and delayed gratification can restore your ability to focus. This process is sometimes called a dopamine reset, and it involves consciously limiting or eliminating the artificial stimuli that hijack your attention. When you stop flooding your system with easy dopamine from distractions, your receptors begin to regain their sensitivity. Over time, you start to find satisfaction in the slower, more deliberate work that actually moves you toward meaningful goals. This process can be uncomfortable at first because it forces you to sit with the discomfort of boredom and resist the urge to escape it. But with practice, you strengthen the circuits of your brain that support sustained attention and weaken the ones that drive compulsive distraction. Another important aspect of dopamine is its role in anticipation rather than just reward. Research shows that dopamine levels spike in response to cues that predict a reward, not simply when the reward is received. This means that the process of working toward a goal is itself highly motivating if framed correctly. When you set clear milestones and create a sense of progress, you can tap into your brain's natural dopamine-driven desire to keep moving forward. But if you overwhelm yourself with unrealistic goals or fail to recognize small wins along the way, you deprive yourself of the motivational signals that keep you engaged. This is why breaking down complex tasks into manageable steps and celebrating incremental progress is so effective for maintaining focus. It aligns your internal reward system with the external task at hand. Sleep, nutrition, and stress also influence how well your dopamine system functions. Chronic sleep deprivation, for example, impairs dopamine receptor sensitivity, making it harder to feel motivated and focused even on enjoyable tasks. Poor nutrition, especially diets high in processed sugar and low in essential amino acids, can disrupt dopamine production. Chronic stress floods your brain with cortisol, which over time damages the neural circuits involved in motivation and reward. All of these factors compound the effects of modern distractions, creating a perfect storm of dopamine dysfunction and attentional collapse. By addressing these underlying issues, getting enough sleep, eating a balanced diet, managing stress, you can restore the health of your dopamine system and improve your capacity for focus. Understanding how dopamine drives attention also helps explain why multitasking feels rewarding even though it destroys productivity. Each time you switch tasks, your brain releases a small amount of dopamine in response to the novelty. This creates a temporary sense of accomplishment and stimulation, but it comes at the cost of deeper engagement and sustained performance. Multitasking trains your brain to stay in a shallow mode of processing, hopping from one thing to the next without ever dropping into the deeper states of concentration where real progress happens. The antidote to this is monotasking, choosing one thing to focus on and committing to it fully, even when the urge to switch arises. Over time, This retrains your dopamine system to find reward in depth rather than novelty, which is essential for building the kind of focus that leads to meaningful achievement. When you begin to see your struggles with focus through the lens of dopamine, they become less about personal weakness and more about biology and conditioning. You can take steps to reclaim control over your attention by being mindful of how you engage with sources of artificial novelty, by nourishing your body and brain, and by structuring your work in a way that leverages your natural reward mechanisms. This approach not only improves your ability to focus, but also enhances your overall sense of motivation and fulfillment, because it aligns your daily actions with the way your brain was designed to operate. The human brain is not designed to handle multiple streams of complex information at the same time, yet in today's world, many people believe that multitasking is a skill to be mastered rather than a trap to be avoided. Every time you attempt to split your attention between two or more tasks, you engage in what neuroscientists call task switching, not true multitasking. The mind cannot focus on two cognitively demanding activities simultaneously. Instead, it toggles rapidly between them, creating the illusion of parallel processing while actually performing each task more slowly and with less accuracy. This constant switching comes with a measurable cost known as the switching cost, which refers to the mental effort and time lost as the brain reorients itself each time attention shifts. These switching costs accumulate throughout the day, leaving you more mentally fatigued and less productive than if you had simply focused on one thing at a time. When you try to do multiple things at once, you activate competing neural networks in the brain. Each task requires different circuits, and those circuits cannot operate at full capacity when being forced to alternate their activity. For example, reading an email while listening to a meeting or checking a message while writing a report splits your prefrontal cortex's resources, diluting your ability to hold relevant information. In working memory and impairing decision making, the brain's attentional systems have to disengage from one task and re-engage with another each time you switch. This disengagement and re-engagement may only take fractions of a second, but over hundreds of switches per day, it adds up to a staggering amount of wasted cognitive energy. You may feel busy and even productive because your mind is constantly occupied, but in reality, the quality and depth of your work suffer. In addition to these switching costs, multitasking fragments your ability to enter states of deep focus, sometimes called flow states. Flow is a psychological condition in which attention becomes fully absorbed in a single activity, leading to heightened creativity, faster learning, and greater satisfaction. The brain requires a period of sustained, undistracted engagement to enter flow. Each interruption, even brief, breaks this engagement and forces the brain to reset. Research shows it can take up to 20 minutes to regain full concentration after even a short distraction. If you are constantly shifting between tasks, you deprive yourself of the opportunity to reach these deeper levels of focus and the rewards they bring. This is why so many people feel perpetually scattered and overwhelmed despite spending long hours working. They are working wide but not working deep. The myth of multitasking is further reinforced by the temporary dopamine boosts that come with novelty. Every time you switch tasks and encounter something new, a notification, a message, a new headline, your brain releases a small burst of dopamine. This creates a sense of stimulation and even accomplishment, but it is superficial. Over time, this habit trains your brain to seek novelty rather than depth, weakening your ability to tolerate the discomfort of sustained focus. The more you indulge in task switching, the more your neural pathways adapt to this fragmented mode of operating, making it harder and harder to concentrate for long periods. This is why many people find it almost unbearable to sit still and work on a single task without checking their phones or bouncing to another tab on their browser. Monotasking, focusing on one thing at a time, is the antidote to this problem. When you deliberately choose to give your full attention to a single task, you align your brain's resources toward a common goal, reducing cognitive load and improving efficiency. Studies show that monotaskers complete tasks faster, make fewer mistakes, and retain more information than those who attempt to multitask. Monotasking also preserves mental energy by minimizing the constant reorientation that comes with switching, leaving you with greater reserves of focus and willpower for the tasks that matter most. Developing the habit of monotasking requires discipline at first because the modern world constantly tempts you with distractions, but over time it rewires your brain to find satisfaction in depth. Rather than surface-level novelty, the impact of multitasking extends beyond cognitive performance and into emotional well-being. When you divide your attention across multiple tasks, you create a sense of constant, low-grade stress as your mind struggles to keep track of competing demands. This fragmented state activates the body's stress response, increasing cortisol levels and leaving you feeling anxious and drained. Even when you are not consciously aware of it, your nervous system registers this constant switching as a form of mental overload. Over time, this can lead to burnout, sleep disturbances, and a diminished sense of accomplishment. Conversely, when you work on one task at a time, you create a sense of control and mastery that is deeply satisfying and calming to the nervous system. This not only improves your productivity, but also your overall mental health. Another hidden cost of multitasking is its effect on memory and learning. When you split your focus, the brain's ability to encode information into long-term memory is impaired. You may feel like you are absorbing more because you are exposed to more, but in reality, you are retaining less. This is particularly relevant in situations where you are trying to learn new skills or process complex information. Multitasking prevents the deep processing necessary for meaningful learning and understanding, leading to superficial knowledge that is easily forgotten. This is why students and professionals alike who study or work with constant background distractions often struggle to recall what they learned or accomplished. Even in social and personal contexts, the habit of multitasking erodes the quality of your interactions and experiences. When your attention is divided, you are not fully present with the people around you or the activity you are engaged in. This diminishes the richness of your relationships and the joy of your experiences. Being fully attentive, even for short periods, creates a sense of connection and fulfillment that multitasking can never provide. By reclaiming your attention from the constant pull of competing demands and choosing to focus on one thing at a time, you not only improve your performance, but also deepen your experience of life itself. The culture of busyness often celebrates those who can juggle multiple things at once, but the reality is that true excellence comes from focus and depth, not from dispersion and breadth. Training yourself to resist the allure of multitasking and to embrace monotasking as a deliberate practice can transform the way you work, think, and live. It requires awareness, intention, and sometimes the courage to slow down in a world that prizes speed, but the rewards of clarity, productivity, and peace of mind make it one of the most powerful habits you can cultivate. Focus is often thought of as something you either have or don't, but neuroscience shows it is much more like a skill, one that can be developed and strengthened over time through deliberate training. Just as your physical muscles grow and adapt with consistent, targeted exercise, the neural circuits that support focus can also be reinforced and improved through intentional mental and visual practices. This idea is critical to understand because it shifts the mindset away from blaming yourself for being easily distracted and toward taking practical steps to improve your attentional control. The brain's ability to adapt, called neuroplasticity, means that the more you engage in behaviors that demand and sustain focus, the stronger and more efficient the related neural pathways become. The areas of the brain most involved in focus include the prefrontal cortex, which manages executive function and goal-directed behavior, and the parietal cortex, which helps allocate attention to specific parts of your sensory field. These areas are connected through networks that can be thought of as the brain spotlight. They determine what information in your internal or external environment gets amplified and what gets Suppressed, when you train focus, you are essentially training your brain to keep that spotlight steady on one target for longer and with less effort. This kind of training is not something that happens passively. It requires repeated exposure to tasks that stretch your capacity to sustain attention, gradually extending how long you can remain engaged without succumbing to distraction. One of the most effective ways to train focus is through visual practices. Vision and focus are deeply interconnected because your eyes are an extension of your nervous system, directly wired to the brain areas that control attention and arousal. When you deliberately narrow your visual field onto a single point, such as staring at a fixed spot on a wall or focusing on an object in front of you, your brain shifts into a mode of heightened concentration. This narrow visual focus activates what's known as the spotlight system in your brain, signaling that you are choosing to attend to one specific thing while ignoring the rest. Practicing this simple exercise, holding your gaze on one point for a few minutes while resisting the urge to look around, can strengthen your ability to sustain attention in other tasks as well. In addition to visual practices, mental exercises like mindfulness meditation have been shown to improve focus by training the brain to return attention to a chosen target despite distractions. In mindfulness, you usually pick an anchor, such as your breath, and simply observe it. When your mind inevitably wanders, you notice it and gently guide it back. This process, noticing distraction and returning to the task, is itself the training. Over time, it strengthens the neural circuits involved in attentional control and makes it easier to stay engaged with a task without becoming derailed by irrelevant thoughts or external interruptions. Even just a few minutes of this kind of practice each day has been shown in studies to improve cognitive performance, working memory, and the ability to focus under stress. Another effective approach is setting up deliberate periods of deep work, where you commit to a single task for a set amount of time and push through the initial discomfort of boredom or distraction. These sessions act like a workout for your brain, challenging it to stay engaged longer and longer each time. Initially, you might only be able to sustain focus for 10 or 15 minutes, but with consistent practice, you can stretch that to 30 minutes, an hour, or more. The key is to treat these sessions as skill building rather than performance. Even if you feel frustrated or scattered, the act of staying with the task is what strengthens your capacity over time. Just as a beginner in the gym struggles to lift heavy weights at first, but grows stronger with each session, your ability to focus grows with repeated effort. Incorporating recovery into your focus training is equally important. The brain cannot maintain peak focus indefinitely, and trying to push beyond its limits can lead to mental fatigue and burnout. Short, intentional breaks between periods of focused work help restore the brain's resources and make subsequent sessions more effective. Practices like walking outside, closing your eyes for a few minutes, or even practicing optic flow, moving through an environment while letting your eyes take in the movement of the surroundings, can help calm the nervous system and reset your attentional circuits. These recovery practices don't just feel good, they actually enhance your ability to come back and focus more deeply when it counts. Learning to train focus also involves building tolerance for discomfort. Deep focus often feels boring or frustrating at first because your brain has been conditioned to crave novelty and constant stimulation. When you deny yourself the easy escape of distractions and stay with the task, you are teaching your brain to find satisfaction in depth rather than novelty. This shift in mindset is essential because it aligns your internal reward system with the kinds of behaviors that lead to real progress. Over time, you begin to find the process of focusing less aversive and more intrinsically rewarding, which further reinforces the habit. Training focus through these deliberate practices does more than just improve productivity. It changes how you experience the world. You start to notice more details, think more clearly, and feel more present in your life. You become better at managing your own mind, steering your attention where you want it to go rather than letting it be pulled in 100 directions. This sense of agency and mastery over your own mental state is deeply empowering, and it spills over into every area of life, from work and learning to relationships and personal growth. The more you train your focus, the more you strengthen not just your brain's attentional circuits, but also your sense of purpose, clarity, and control. The environment you spend your time in has a profound and often underestimated influence on your ability to sustain focus. Many people believe that focus is simply a matter of internal discipline or willpower, but the truth is that your surroundings constantly send signals to your brain that either support or undermine your attention. The human nervous system evolved in environments that were relatively simple and predictable, with natural rhythms of light, sound, and movement. In contrast, modern environments are filled with noise, clutter, artificial lighting, and a constant stream of digital interruptions, all of which can overload your senses and scatter your mental resources. Understanding how to design your environment to reduce unnecessary distractions and promote attentional control is one of the most effective ways to improve focus without relying solely on internal effort. Visual clutter is one of the most immediate and obvious ways your environment can drain your focus. The human brain processes visual information constantly, even when you are not consciously paying attention to it. When your workspace is filled with unrelated objects, papers, screens, and other stimuli, your attentional system must work harder to filter out irrelevant information and stay on task. Research shows that cluttered environments increase cognitive load, slow down decision making, and even raise stress levels. By contrast, clean, organized spaces free up mental energy, allowing you to allocate more of your brain's limited resources to the task at hand. Creating a visually simple and orderly workspace signals to your brain that it is time to focus, which helps you enter a more concentrated state more quickly and stay there longer. Noise is another powerful environmental factor that affects your ability to focus. The auditory system is designed to be highly sensitive to changes in the environment, a trait that was once essential for detecting danger but now makes it difficult to ignore background sounds like conversations, traffic, or office equipment. Even low-level noise that you may think you've tuned out can impair memory, increase error rates, and make it harder to stay engaged with demanding tasks. Strategies such as working in quiet locations, using noise, canceling headphones, or playing low-volume white noise or nature sounds can help mitigate the impact of distracting noises. The goal is to create an auditory environment that is as stable and predictable as possible, which allows your nervous system to feel safe enough to devote more resources to deep work. Lighting also plays a critical role in regulating your ability to focus by influencing your circadian rhythm and your levels of alertness. Exposure to natural light during the day, particularly in the morning, helps set your internal clock, boosting cortisol and alertness at the right times and promoting restful sleep at night. Conversely, working in dim, poorly lit environments can make you feel sluggish and impair your cognitive performance. On the other hand, exposure to bright artificial light late into the evening can disrupt your circadian rhythm, making it harder to fall asleep and recover fully for the next day. To optimize your lighting environment, try to work near a window when possible, or use full-spectrum artificial lighting that mimics daylight during the day while reducing exposure to bright screens and overhead lights at night. This alignment with natural light cycles supports not just focus, but also overall mental and physical health. The layout and ergonomics of your workspace also influence how effectively you can focus. A poorly arranged space that forces you to reach awkwardly, sit uncomfortably, or strain your eyes can create subtle physical stress that competes with your cognitive resources. Over time, these small sources of discomfort add up, pulling attention away from your work and increasing fatigue. Designing a workspace with supportive seating, proper desk height, and good screen placement can help reduce these distractions and allow you to maintain concentration for longer periods. Even small adjustments, like keeping frequently used items within easy reach and positioning your screen to reduce glare, can make a significant difference. Another aspect of environment design is managing digital spaces, which are just as important as physical ones. Your computer, phone, and other devices are filled with potential distractions that can interrupt your focus even when you have the best intentions. Notifications, endless tabs, social media feeds, and email alerts all compete for your attention, each one pulling you slightly off track. One of the most powerful steps you can take to improve focus is to actively shape your digital environment by turning off unnecessary notifications, using apps or browser extensions that block distracting websites during work sessions, and keeping only the applications or tabs you need open at any given time. This creates a cleaner mental workspace and reinforces your intention to stay focused. In addition to reducing distractions, your environment can also be designed to include positive cues that support focus and motivation. Small rituals such as lighting a candle, playing a specific type of music, or having a dedicated spot for focused work can act as signals to your brain that it is time to concentrate. These cues help create a mental association between your environment and the state of deep focus, making it easier to slip into that state each time you enter the space. This kind of conditioning is powerful because it works with your nervous system rather than against it, lowering the amount of effort required to begin and sustain focused work. Even your social environment influences your ability to focus. Being surrounded by people who are themselves distracted, noisy, or frequently interrupting, you can make it almost impossible to maintain attention. On the other hand, working in a space where others are quietly focused can help you tap into a collective sense of concentration and accountability. Setting boundaries with colleagues, family members, or friends about when you are and are not available for interruptions is a key part of designing an environment that respects and protects your focus. Designing your environment intentionally requires some thought and experimentation, but it is one of the most effective and sustainable ways to improve your ability to focus. By reducing visual and auditory distractions, optimizing lighting and ergonomics, managing your digital spaces, creating supportive rituals, and setting boundaries with others, you create conditions that make it easier for your brain to do what it is designed to do. Instead of constantly fighting against an environment that pulls your attention in every direction, you work with your surroundings to make focus the path of least resistance. This alignment between your external world and your internal goals frees up mental energy, reduces stress, and allows you to engage more fully with the tasks and experiences that matter most.